Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this HomeViews hosted webinar on the new build resident experience. And the title of the webinar is New Build Homes Tested and Rated. 12,000 residents reveal all. We went for a bit of a sensationalist title, but while avoiding sensationalist headlines, the whole point of this webinar is to cut through to the reality of the resident experience in new build homes in the UK. And it's on the back of a report that we're publishing today that you will be able to download immediately after this webinar. And I'll explain a little bit more about what's in that report and then get into a discussion with the panelists about some of the key trends we see coming through from residents. But without further ado, I just want to introduce my all-star panel. So I'm very happy today to introduce firstly Alex Rose, who's Director of New Homes at Zoopla and oversees the commercial success of its CRM, sales progression and marketing products to over 300 house builders, many of you who will be on the call today. We're also joined, oh, sorry, I said Chris Jones, didn't I? It meant Alex Rose. That's my first slip. We're also joined by Chris Jones, who's Managing Director of Space and Time, the independent growth marketing agency, which offering is around media technology and performance creative and training. And basically the agency ensures that you're getting optimal value for every part of your customer experience and marketing investment. And we work very closely with Space and Time and a number of mutual partners to make sure that the resident experience is coming through in marketing messaging. And finally, Darren McCormack, who is Group Sales and Marketing Director at Fairview New Homes. Fairview have been building high quality homes in London and the home counties since 1961. And as a partner of HomeViews, Fairview has been sharing or showcasing through over 300 now verified resident reviews what it's like to live in a Fairview home. And throughout the few years we've been working with Darren, we've been able to show that they are extremely highly rated by first-time buyers for value and for build quality, which really resonates with the core values of Fairview. So Darren, welcome. Chris and Alex, thank you very much for joining me. So firstly, maybe just a quick overview. Some of you may already be aware of HomeViews, but for those of you that aren't, why are we in a position? And lastly, sorry, I should introduce myself. I'm CEO and co-founder of HomeViews, Rory Cramer, and we are today going to look at the summaries of our report on the new build resident experience. But firstly, to explain why we can provide this data. We set HomeViews up in 2019. We are the only dedicated review site for new build developments. And we purely focus on resident reviews, and we ask those residents who they are, so we'll be able to define the experience across owners, shared owners and tenants. And having initially just focused on London, we now cover the whole of the UK. HomeViews is different from any other review site because it is purely dedicated to new builds. We verify all the reviews. We effectively do an automated KYC check, which checks the electoral roll, credit card contracts and mobile phone contracts. So all the data we're talking about today is from verified residents. The reviews are at development level. And so, we're able to look at individual building experience as well as brand experience. We segment who the residents are. So we're able to look at the experience across, as I said, owners, shared owners and tenants. And there's over 18 data points in just one of our reviews. So they're incredibly insightful from a ratings perspective, but also an experience perspective. And I'll show you some of the questions we asked. And also because we proactively source reviews, so our reviews are from every major brand across the new build sector, we're able to show what good looks like from the point of view of the resident across the whole new build industry. And these are just some of the additional questions. If you've been on HomeViews, you'll see the data that you get to see on the front end of the website. We ask a lot of additional questions to owners, to new build owners, to first-time buyers, to build-to-rent tenants, including, is sustainability important to you? And customer service ratings, which you'll see a lot of this data come through in the report. So as I mentioned, we initially launched in London. We're now UK-wide. We're the largest data set of verified resident reviews. We have over 35,000 reviews on HomeViews now. We cover 2,300 residential developments. We estimate that covers around about 300,000 homes. And one of the features we're really proud of, and something I wanted to just mention today, is if you go to the homepage of HomeViews, you scroll down about halfway, you'll see our map module. And as of last year, we moved into the regions, particularly the housing sector. So now you can look for the top rated developments by every region in the UK, and within those regions by every county and every city. And this is a great way for consumers to navigate if they're looking for a particular location, but it's also a great way for anyone within the industry to see our coverage. So that's us. Hopefully that explains why HomeViews and we're in a position to provide this narrative and to host this discussion. The New Build Resident Experience Report is the first time we've ever done a report like this. Many of you will hopefully be aware of our Build to Rent report, which has really become kind of part of the furniture in the build to rent industry as a barometer of the resident experience. And this is the first time we've ever done the same, purely focused on the build to sell market and looking at new homes in general. This report, which, as I said, you'll get a chance to download immediately after this webinar, looks at 12,000 verified reviews across the sector. 60% of those reviews are from owners, so owners and shared owners, and the remaining 40% is from tenants in build to sell developments as well, who obviously have a very valid experience of that product. And we cover more than 130 developers and over 1,000 developments within this report. And we believe it's the largest and most detailed national survey of the new build lived experience. Some headlines is, firstly, very positive. Overall, owners rate their experience at 3.9 out of 5. The buying experience was also generally positive, at 79% of owners saying they would recommend their developer. Shared owners rate their buying experience consistently lower than owners, which I think is something, with the looming closure of Help to Buy, we do see, and I think the industry sees, shared ownership is going to be increasingly relevant to help people get on the ladder. So understanding, the differential in that experience, I think is really important, and our data shows it is down to that buying and after sales care experience. But some great news is that the youngest owners have the most positive lived experience of any group. And actually we'll be able to show that breakdown in a second. So as I mentioned within the report, I'm not going to go into too much detail today because there's some specific subjects I want to mention, but we break down the experience. And in HomeViews, we talk about the lived experience, which is the experience of living in the development, which you can see on the website, but we also collect data on the buying experience, which we'll cover in this report. But you can see all of these experiences are broken down by resident type, even by age group as well. And then looking at the buying experience, how that differs between owners and shared owners. And one little stat I thought was really interesting here is that shared owners rate build quality basically on par with private owners, but it's the experience of purchasing the after sales care that slightly lets that experience down where that differential is. So I think a lot to be learned, and this isn't, by the way, this is a general view. There are some very highly rated shared owner experience, and in fact in this report we show the top rated housing associations by shared owners as well. We look at one of the qualitative questions we ask is what one thing you wish you'd known before you'd moved in, and we looked at the top 10 things owners wish they'd known before they'd moved in. We actually created a new build buyer's guide, which we launched at the London Home Show, but we weave this narrative in with all the other data to really identify certain trends that come through from residents. Practical things like parking arrangements, the quality of the garden, snagging surveys, viewing the property at different times of the day, stuff that us within the industry would probably take for granted, but particularly if you're a first-time buyer, you may well never have thought of. We're very lucky this year to have Zoopla providing commentary on this report. Thank you to Alex and the team. And I think what you'll see this commentary punctuating the report throughout. What's great to see is our data really backs each other up. from completely independent sources, particularly around the importance of sustainability, a very topical subject at the moment with the cost of living crisis. But you'll see within the report lots of data combining Zoopla's view and HomeView's view as well, which I think provides a really interesting narrative. So thank you, Alex. And also in the report, we will be showing the top rated developers for first-time buyers, the top rated housing associations for shared owners, and we'll also be showing the top rated developers for build quality, customer service, owner recommends, and looking at some of the top rated developments for design and other lived experience ratings that we collect. So loads of juicy bits of information in the report, so please do download it. And if you have any questions about it, you can get through to us. And in terms of some of the top rated brands, now, just in case there's any doubt, this report looks at the whole industry. Yes, some of our partners are recommended as top rated, and Fairview, and it's great to have Darren on the call today, are one of the highest rated developers for build quality. They also made the top 10 list for value and customer service and owner recommend, as well as first time buyers. And we'll be talking to Darren today about how Fairview have achieved that, because it really reflects the core values of the brand. But there's loads of developers recognized, some of which we don't even speak to or partner with. So this is really a reflection of the performance of the whole market. Barratt London also really highly rated, particularly in the London market, for owner recommends and top 10 lists for design. So a real cross section of data to look at. So that's enough from me. I think what we'd like to do now is kind of start the discussion on a few key trends that has come through within the report. And firstly, I'd like to talk about sustainability. Now, the cost of living crisis is putting a microscope on energy efficiency. And I think one of the questions we ask residents is sustainability important to you? And if you select yes, then we ask you which features of your home are most important to you. And there's a whole section within the report that shows that can change dependent on how old you are, and geographically where you live and the type of property that you live in. But interestingly, 70% of the respondents on HomeView said yes, sustainability is important to them. But if you look at the first-time buyer categories, only 31% of them said it was. And so I'd like to discuss that a little deeper, because on the Zoopla data, it found similar trend that 70% of new build respondents said energy efficiency was extremely or very important to them, but only 41% of resale respondents said the same. So Alex, first question to you. Have you seen changes in how important energy efficiency is to buyers over time and sustainability? And is it an increasing concern for them?
Yeah, thanks, Rory. Thanks for the intro and having me on this morning. I mean, as you say, you mentioned our report. We did a survey of people who were either going through the home buying process or had gone through it in the last 18 months. And we sort of asked them around sustainability. And I think the main theme that came through was obviously energy efficiency. And many people with the cost of living crisis are being attracted by new homes. The average EPC rating on a new home built last year was a B, whereas the average in the resale market is a D. And if you look at the kind of cost saving between the two on an annual basis, given the recent increase in price caps and probably another one expected in October, the average saving that someone can achieve is around 52%. So broadly, on a sort of an average mid-sized home, according to the Ofgem stats, they'd be saving £1,400 a year. So I think clearly there are people being attracted to that, but also something that backs up a nuance that you discovered as well in your data was that it is seen as coming at a premium, and so it's only either older generation buyers who've got some equity in their property that can afford perhaps to pay for that, that are actually acting on that and are purchasing on that basis. Yeah. For first-time buyers, clearly affordability is more constrained, and so I think from a prioritization, it's not to say that they care less about sustainability or energy efficiency. Arguably, you could say they care more, but when it comes to affordability and their buying decisions, they're saying, actually, it's about me getting on the ladder and having a home for my family and somewhere we can grow into, rather than necessarily being able to say, I can make that step and put it up my prioritization list.
So I think there's something to take out of that, which is actually spelling out the cost saving around a new home, and I think that stat you just shared, about the real saving for someone. That's something to kind of take away, I think, particularly in how you communicate the benefits of new build at this particular point in time with this narrative, owning the news most days and the papers. Darren, from your perspective at Fairview, have you seen this consideration move up the priority list for your buyers? I mean, your buyers, as we show in our data, are often first-time buyers, and they are searching for high quality homes at value for money. But have you seen an increase in demand? How are you responding to this as a business?
Similar to what Alex has said, really. I think people still fundamentally pick where they want to live based on location and price. What we tend to find is people who are coming in, they are interested in knowing about the features. However, it's not a key decision maker. So if you've got one development which has some eco features and another development which doesn't, they will still choose between either or. They're not just going to go to the green development, unfortunately. So there's no such thing as a green pound yet. I think it's something the industry is being pushed down, and it's something which is becoming higher up on everyone's agenda to be a little bit more eco-friendly. So I think in the future, they will be a green pound, and I think people will start to make a decision based on the impact they're having on the environment. But at the moment, that's not happening. So what we do as a developer, similar to most other developers, we just try to educate. So when we've got air source heat pumps, we try to educate them about the benefits of that, both in the short term and in the long term.
Yeah, I think that understanding the practical features of a home that have an impact on how people live, like electric car charging, bike storage, that can be a real hook. But as you say, it's still about affordability and where people want to live. Chris, do you, from a sort of overarching perspective, do you see that there is consumer demand for sustainability, and how do you integrate that into a marketing campaign, or don't you at this stage? What's your advice to your clients?
Yeah, well, thanks, Rory, again for having me on. I think this is all massively prevalent at the moment, and I think kind of reassuringly, it seems that between a lot of us, either from our own experience and anecdotally, or through research that we conducted recently, the data signals and the messages are all very consistent. So we've even, there's a piece of research that we're publishing in a few weeks. That's not a plug. But we are producing a piece of research in a few weeks, which actually reinforces a lot of the points that Rory, you just touched on, and Alex, you've alluded to. And I think from what was absolutely clear is we researched about 2,000 responses across the UK, similar to yours, and the same thing was there in terms of there is massive intent from across the piece in terms of people wanting to be more sustainable and people wanting to engage with sustainability. But actually there was, when we really looked at it from a home buyer's perspective, there was actually only something like 65% that, so 65% of it had it as a consideration, but only 4% had it as their top priority. So to Darren's point there, yeah, it's in the mix, but it's certainly not a deciding factor. And I think what that starts to do from a kind of the predicament we face in terms of how you reach these people and how you engage them is, I think the insight suggests, like I say, high levels of intent, but actually quite low willingness to put their hands in their pocket. Now, there are some nuances in there, and we actually sort of looked at people's kind of willingness to spend across the board, be it in property, automotive, even sort of household products. And the kind of willingness to spend was genuinely kind of less than 5% pretty much across all age groups. The only age group that kind of broke through that was certainly those that are kind of significantly more affluent. So you generally have engagement with the subject, but kind of a little bit of a kind of lack of willingness to act on it. And then I think just generally there is a lack of understanding in the sector across home buyers and across the consumer, to Alex's point about the kind of legislative changes that are coming and the cost implications on them. So where I think there's a lot of cost motivation, there's not a lot of understanding is the fact there's an implication if they don't do something about that in their as part of their kind of buying considerations. And I think when you flex that into kind of what you need to do about it, I think it breaks down into kind of three areas. So number one, if you take Darren's point there, I think that the really good thing about what Fairview have done is they've thought about how the message around sustainability is embedded into their organization across every different part of their business, because there's no point talking about sustainability in your marketing if actually the sales experience or the product isn't consistent with that, because marketing ROI is only dependent on sales. There's no point in generating an inquiry or engagement if it doesn't result in a value at the end of it. So that has to be consistent. I think the second sort of way that we need to do this, Rory, is that I think it's about intelligence. So in the kind of digital landscape, which is obviously kind of the angle I'm looking at here, you've got a lot of kind of prevailing changes in the industry. So lots of, so say for instance with Apple, they're pulling back on use of third-party cookies, which is going to put greater reliance on customer data, which I think actually means that if you an intelligent business is going to have a huge amount of intelligence on their consumer, and if you understand your consumer, then you're going to be serving the kind of right messages around sustainability to the right people, because there are massively kind of fragmented stories in there. And then I think that's where when you think about it in terms of an activation point of view, the final point would be around experience. So again, to the point I was saying about setting it up in your business, if you talk about sustainability in your marketing, the premise of kind of right time, right user, right place is still the same, but there isn't a one size fits all approach to it. We have to understand the kind of different parts of what motivate people to engage with it. So where you've got a sort of at the higher end of the affordability bracket, there tends to be more engagement with sustainable product features. And then at kind of the first-time buyer and the more affordable end of the market, there tends to be more engagement with how that's materially going to affect their bottom line essentially and their costs. So that's where those three things: organizing your business to make it ubiquitous across the organization, having an understanding of visibility of customer data, because that's the way the industry is moving. And then once you've got that, having a kind of not having a one size fits all strategy to how you target them. It's those three things that I think are key.
I think that's really important. And so I think, just to summarize on sustainability, that the views of purchasers differ depending on their age group, their point in life. I think being able to pick out specific features of a home or of a brand that you can really back up through that sales process is absolutely key. It needs to be genuine. But I do think from a first-time buyer perspective of that younger generation, like showing them the lifestyle impact, so electric car charging, lots of bike storage, the practical things that sustainable features can provide, as well as cost savings and the impact of your wallet is where to get value out of it. But we could talk about that subject forever. I'm going to move on now. One of the ratings that we ask on HomeViews is to rate design. And we also ask you what's the favorite feature of your home. So I think it's no surprise, space, views, kitchens, balconies were very popular choices when residents were asked about the best feature of their home. Within the report, we actually identify the top 3 buildings as rated, developments as rated for design in the whole of the UK. What's really interesting is all 3 of them are towers. They're over 20 stories. And actually the number 1 development, which is called Hoxton Press by Anthology for design, which is designed by David Chipperfield, a world-renowned UK-based architect. So obviously residents value architecture, and where they're buying into that level of design, they're really, they love that about their product. But on a slightly more practical front, one of the big issues that came through was parking consistently. And I know this isn't purely a design question, this is also a planning point, but so many residents bemoan the lack of parking. Now, whether that's in a housing development where cars end up being parked on pavements, which stop mums and dads pushing their prams along the pavement safely, or whether it's in an apartment development where there is just no space and they can't get a residence permit. This was a real thing, and it came up time and time again. So I think I want to address this. Darren, as a London-focused developer, is this parking issue more about communication with buyers and the kind of letting them know about other options like car clubs and nearby transport hubs? How do you deal with this? And is this something you get feedback from your buyers on as well?
Yes, it's something which is not only frustrating to potential buyers, but it's frustrating to us, because fundamentally, if we had more parking, would be appealing to a much larger audience to be able to sell. So what we try to do is we try to add some context to it. So before I get to the alternatives, we try to explain to customers, this isn't a case of us not wanting to provide parking. As you rightly said, it's enforced upon most developers, largely down to local authorities and the GLA. All schemes going forward are kind of lucky to get 50–60% parking. And if you're closer to a tube station or a train station, then you'd be lucky to get parking. So it's a constant battle that we're having. Now, the whole purpose of what the local authorities and GLA are trying to do is they're trying to reduce the greenhouse gases. So again, following on from your sustainability point and the environment, they're doing it for all the right reasons. It's just the wider public haven't necessarily came along on that ride yet, because we're a nation which we're comfortable with our cars. We like our own independence. So therefore, one of the things that we have to do after we've provided context is we have to explain to them what the options are. So most developers have to put a huge cycling provision into our developments now. We also have to provide improvements to the local infrastructure. So for instance, if there's a bus service locally, we might have to really egg that up to have more buses that come every single hour. We also try to make people aware of things such as car clubs. So unfortunately, not all developments do have car clubs, but if there is a car club available, we'll make them aware of how they work and how they can benefit from that. Sometimes, and we get this all the time, where people say, I get everything that you're saying, but I just want to keep my car. Then it comes down to, we have to advise them of the various kind of websites that are out there where you can go and you can hire parking off development. And I think this is going to be a gradual process. People need to see more and more developments with less parking for them to decide, well, I do want to be in London, and this is a change that I have to gradually go through, similar to the sustainability side.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Alex, this was where our data again overlapped and backed each other up. Your data showed that off-street parking is one of the most searched features for buyers outside of London. And our data was showing, this wasn't just about London developers, this is about developments all over the country. As well as off-street parking, what are the other features that you see searched for the most? And does that change regionally, and has it changed in recent years in your experience?
Yeah, I think actually I just wanted to quickly answer or sort of back up a point that Darren made, because I think it's really important about the perception of new homes buyers. And I think one of the reasons we find there's a high index on searches for new build where people are looking for parking, there's this perception that actually it's sort of greedy developers chasing density, and not providing enough parking. And so I think the industry as a whole, and we play a role in that, there is an educational piece about, there is a very deliberate decision in planning that is about driving, as we say, sustainability and a green agenda. So important to think about how we're offsetting the lack of parking, or the perceived lack of parking, with, as you say, whether it be cycling facilities, commuter infrastructure, train lines, etc., etc. So I think we do see that there is a big importance, and we've always seen that on new build searches are, people are sort of filtering out to try and get the stuff with parking, because there is a value to that. Obviously, since the pandemic, kicked off really in March 2020, we have seen a further shift in a kind of a race for space, really. And I think that often conjures up images of people moving out of cities, mass migration away from cities and into, sort of rural living. But actually, I think it's all relative to the location that you're in. So, what does good space look like in an urban location? Well, that could be access to green areas, community centres or facilities on site, local amenities, a balcony, those sorts of things are important to people. Obviously, as you go more suburban, we've seen that actually it's about larger properties that people have been looking for. And there's been an increase in searches for homes over apartments, and an increase in larger properties with 3 or 4 bedrooms or potentially a garage. So about 80% of respondents in our survey said that access to a garden or an outdoor space was important, but also larger properties. And I think that's been largely about people maybe changing use of a bedroom into a home office, or I remember in the height of COVID when we were all doing home workouts with Joe Wicks every day, and so people perhaps having home gyms, which might have become rather expensive laundry rooms now, or something like that. But I think in general it's been space, and in terms of regional variances, as I say, it's more been about the definition of space and what can you afford in that area being important to you.
Thanks, Alex. One of the, I suppose from a HomeViews perspective, we're able to segment what and really provide insights into specific target markets for developers. So whether it be a younger age group or first-time buyers, or even investors, and what they are saying about what's important to them, what's working and what's not working. And one of the things I think I've definitely picked up on in my experience is being able to serve a narrative that is specific to a target market about what's important to them, whether that be affordability or build quality or access to transport. And so, Chris, this is a question to you, I suppose, in terms of, does marketing specific features of a property or of a brand, rather than being generalized? I mean, one of the other reasons we set up HomeViews is to create an authentic voice, not just exclusive release of, high quality or luxury apartments. We've heard that millions of times before, but to really be able to say what this means to you as a potential consumer, and how this could affect your lifestyle and your family's lifestyle. Do you see that trend coming in, like being really serving up sort of specific points of data or reference that is going to engage with certain target audiences on digital campaigns?
Without a doubt. There's like the digital environment and the consumer buying journey is more cluttered than ever. So the more that we can serve relevant messaging is always going to effectively perform that much better. It does still, I think the crux of this goes back to some of the points I made on your previous question, which is around, if you can understand your customer properly, and you can use that data efficiently, then you can theoretically serve them those key messages. Now, there are certain things that you can do to kind of turn the dial up or down on that. So, we've done a lot of work with you, Rory, and obviously Darren, you guys at Fairview, in terms of how we can start to leverage customer validation and reviews to actually kind of support some of the things that we're saying. Because in many ways, that is the best validation you've got in your armory. You can put as many 5-star logos up as you like. A lot of those don't mean a huge amount to customers, and the almost a lot of the time now there's a load of data to support this as well. Most recently from Google. One of the key ways that you can kind of cut through the noise and you can actually pull people out of that and serve people the right messages is that, if you can understand what those motivations of that particular consumer are. So if it is parking or if it is sustainability, you're essentially pulling them out of that, but you're validating and you're supporting what you're saying through customer reviews and customer endorsement. You only have to look at Amazon's model in terms of using 5-star reviews to, the difference between a 3-star review in Amazon and a 5-star review is that the 5-star will outsell the 3-star 300 times over. It's
Wow.
genuinely that different. And so the sort of customer endorsement piece and the validation piece, I think, is as important as right message, right time, right user.
Yeah. Yeah, it is amazing, isn't it? We've all had that experience going onto Amazon and not going to look at that product because it's 3 stars versus 5. I think the interesting narrative around that for us is trust, and the trust of reviews. And that was why, we were so keen that it was only verified resident reviews that created a development score and a brand score on HomeView. So, the consumer knows they can trust our feedback. Okay, moving on to another one of the data points we look at in the report is location. 3% of reviewers who rated their location at 1 or 2 stars out of 5 talked about the lack of local amenities, poor transport connections, and local crime. And I think what I took out of this is, what's interesting is you could argue that this is often around placemaking, and we often find that large-scale regeneration schemes on HomeView score higher than standalone developments because they deliver an entire local community. Obviously, it takes time, and often phase 1 of a large regeneration site doesn't get the benefit of all of that, but they know that it's coming. And that these developments deliver that community, often transport connections, better ways to deal with local crime. But there is a real challenge for developers in building in a regeneration area, and how to introduce that area as well, that no one's lived in. I was speaking to a developer who is developing in Slough, which has obviously predominantly been sort of in the core of the city, an industrial and a business district, and then rebranding that district as somewhere to live within, earshot of London, is part of the narrative. I think that, Chris, how do you build brand reputation of a location as well as a development and developer?
Well, I think this probably brings in a slightly different angle here in terms of we've looked at the consumer angle and what motivates them, but I think this is also really product specific. If you've got a regen scheme, then the reality is, I think Darren made the point right at the beginning, which is that most of the time in a typical scheme, the location is already, they're already sold on that. And that's a critical reason as to why they've made the inquiry. And so yes, there's that requirement to understand your consumers and communicate the right message to motivate them ultimately to purchase and generate ROI. But then if you look at regen schemes, I think there's a whole nother kind of side to this, which is that there is an education factor there because in many cases you've either got significant competition with resale and you need to convert intent from just being in market to being in market for a new home and all the virtues that come with that. And of course, in many cases, and we've got a lot of experience of doing this, particularly in London, is areas that are going through significant and long-term regeneration, where actually there's quite a lot of sort of poor sentiment towards that area that we then need to turn on its head, and that's not something you can achieve within a typical marketing and sales window. It's not something you do with within 6 months of completion or anything like that. There's a phasing and an approach to how you do this, but the kind of principle is the same, in that you've got at that point we need to understand what's motivating people to look in an area, or if they're not looking in an area, we need to understand how we motivate them, and then we need to take them on a sort of phased plan to educate them about everything that either is about the area or the brand or the sort of product at the end of it. And once we kind of establish that, it's a bit more of a shift to I call it a conventional approach in this instance, but it's not conventional in that I don't think there are enough brands doing this, which is right back to where we were talking about before, which is pulling out those motivations and being able to actually tailor a strategy specifically around the audience and the product that you're trying to sell.
That all makes sense, very much so. And Darren, as a developer, you at Fairview, I know, have got significant sort of what I would call regeneration sites, placemaking sites like Regency Heights near Park Royal, and you also develop sort of standalone, smaller boutique developments in established areas. How do you find that the sort of sales process and the education process on a large regeneration site like that is different? Do you have to invest more heavily earlier on to establish the area, or is it basically people have already decided that they want to be there regardless?
Similar to what we said at the start, really, people have decided they want to live in the overall location. It's now about getting down to the nitty gritty of the exact location where you are, and you have to spend a lot longer on educating. So if we look at Regency Heights, when we first launched that scheme, which is now basically sold out, it was some apartments in the middle of a huge commercial area. So a lot of people were saying, well, is this full vision of Old Oak Common going to come off? And so you're having to sell them the overall vision, which is maybe 10, 15, 20 years further down. Some people get it and they'll buy into it, and they will see some of the benefits that maybe some investors would normally see. Other people, they're just put off by it. And our job isn't to necessarily completely convince them. It's to give them the options to say, look, this is a valid option for you based on this, this, and this. Fundamentally, it's down to your decision whether you want to be part of it. And fortunately, if we look at Regency Heights, we sold a thick end of 899 apartments in just over 2 years. So we've had a lot of people who are prepared to look at that vision and go, actually, yeah, I can buy into that and I can go with it.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Dan. I'm conscious of time. I'm going to move on to the next subject, which is value. It's one of the ratings we ask every resident to score out of 5. More than 90% of residents scored their development at 3 out of 5 or higher for value. Now, unsurprisingly, the quality of the build, as well as the processes in place to deal with any problems that arise, have a direct link to buyers' perception of value. So those owners who rated value at 3 or below often linked it to poor quality fixtures or fittings and a slow snagging process or a poor design. So we saw a consistency with that. And out of the 5 main review categories, value is the third highest rated, with over 2/3 of each resident type giving it 4 or 5, demonstrating consistency with overall satisfaction in their property. Now, I was kind of surprised by this, because if you can, particularly for London schemes, if you consider we're in a housing and affordability crisis, so people showing that they feel like they're getting value for money. When they don't, it tends to be because the build quality isn't up to it, or that the process of purchasing has been difficult, and that after sales care and snagging process has been difficult. But on the basis that a lot of the feedback we see is first-time buyers, Help to Buy users, shared owners are just grateful that new build gave them an opportunity to get on the ladder. And first question is for you, Alex. How do search volumes compare for first-time buyers in new build versus standard homes? And is this something that you're seeing changing? And is there a kind of an education process around the schemes within new build to allow first-time buyers to get on the ladder?
Yeah, thanks, Rory. I think we see 2 types of sort of new homes buyer. We generally see those that come onto the Zoopla website and sort of head straight for new homes, filter everything out, and they only want to buy a new property. And so they'll thoroughly research it, they'll get into the brands and who's who. And so you get people that sort of go straight down that route. I think probably our job as a portal is really to actually, how do we start to influence and message those that, are maybe agnostic to whether they're buying a resale or a new, and it's typically through their search journey and their interaction on Zoopla, which may take a bit longer, that the education starts to come in of, well, actually there are schemes available such as Help to Buy or shared ownership that maybe enable me to either buy a slightly bigger or better quality property, or actually just sort of unlock a different area to me, give me more options. The other thing we've seen in the last 12 months, of course, is in the resale market in particular, there hasn't been a huge amount of stock available. So, you know, many buyers have been attracted towards new build because, quite frankly, it's easier. There's no chains, and you know, of course, there's maybe more available products to them. So, we sort of see our job as being able to influence people using the marketing messaging that either you know Fairview are producing, working with Space and Time, and etc. And surfacing that and playing that role for the buyers. It's an education, really. Yeah,
absolutely. And Darren, so without blowing too much smoke at Fairview, obviously this report recognises Fairview in lots of different categories. So not only are you one of the highest rated developers for first-time buyers nationally, you're also on the top 10 list for build quality, for value, for customer service, and owner recommends. And I suppose as a business that's clearly providing a great experience, particularly for first-time buyers, what would you say that you're doing, and not to give away any of your secrets, but you know, what are you doing to provide this experience, and where does this start? You know, obviously this is about the buying experience as well as the delivery. So how would you sum up your approach to get this sort of feedback?
To start with, Rory, it was fantastic for the team to get the recognition, because everyone's, you know, worked incredibly hard to put us in the position that we're in. And as a business, we've got a very clear vision of what we want to achieve and what we want to provide. So providing good quality homes, affordable prices in locations, which every other developer fundamentally wants to do as well. So we're not unique there. I think where we are slightly unique is everyone is aligned with what we're delivering. We want to deliver, we want to do the basics right, and we want to deliver it right first time. Now again, it's really simple, but if you've got everyone aligned in the business with that goal, then it makes it a lot easier, and it comes out fundamentally in your product. I think along the journey as well, we also ensure that we're communicating constantly, especially when we've got first-time buyers, from when they first come in to when they go through the buying process, all the way through. So we're helping manage their expectations of what's next in the process, what they're going to expect. Unfortunately, not all properties are perfect. There is going to be some snags. If you explain to people, most people are rational and they'll understand it, but it's where you try to imagine it's going to be a perfect product built in a factory, and then they go, well, hang on a minute, this isn't right. So summarising it, I'd just say we don't do anything special. We just do what we say we're going to do, and when we say we're going to do it.
Communication, I would say, is the key. Like Darren, when we read, you know, our team read every single review, 35,000 reviews, and when we see the most frustrated residents, it's just that lack of feeling like they're being listened to, lack of action. And so I think everything you said there would make perfect sense. You know, I think you'd be the first to admit that all of your reviews aren't perfect, but where there have been issues, you've responded to it quickly. And ultimately what we find on HomeViews through the verified reviews is that when people know things are going to go wrong, but they want to know that there's a support network in place to deal with that. And that is the key to providing a good owner and a buyer experience in build to sell, I think. Well, congratulations to you and the team, Darren. And you know, this is the only awards and recognition and top rated list that are purely based off verified resident reviews. So I hope it should mean a lot to all of you. Well, listen, we've got 10 minutes to go, and I have seen a couple of questions come in. So guys, I'm gonna put some of these to the board. So James Partager, hi James. In terms of establishing new regeneration locations, how much would a build to rent component assist as a third major component alongside for sale or conventional affordable homes? And can build to rent, you know, seeing as build to rent often can occupy quite quickly and create a sense of community and maybe a different choice. Do we see this as you know, something that is going to become more prevalent when you're looking particularly at large scale schemes? So I think, Darren, I'll come to you first. Like, how obviously Fairview is boot and braces, build to sell developer, but how are you viewing the benefits of build to rent and how that may work together with you, whether it be on one of your sites or within close proximity to one of your sites?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Build to rent is a sector that we are getting more involved in. Maybe not as a priority compared to our build to sell. However, it's such a booming sector at the moment that nobody can ignore it. I think when you're looking at some of the larger schemes which are coming up and the opportunities where we're looking to buy lands, build to rent tends to play a part in some of them, not all of them, but some of them. So I think the question about what part can it play, I think if you've got a fairly big scheme, it certainly has a part to play. You've got to think people's affordability and their ability to be able to buy a new home depends on having a fairly large deposit. With Help to Buy going, now people are going to need an even larger deposit to buy. So therefore, and I very much see a lot of people going into the build to rent sector and renting while they continue to save more and more of a deposit to be able to then come into the private side of buying. So it's certainly going to be part of the full package.
Yeah,
and I think it's here to stay, personally.
Absolutely. I mean, our data would totally back that up. In build to rent residents are shown on HomeViews as having a great experience, and I do think a lot of the developments that are delivered do provide a sense of community and a curation and a benefit not only to the residents within the building but people that live within the area. Chris, Alex, any comments on how build to rent sits alongside build to sell moving forward?
I was just going to add, from my perspective, I think I'm a really big fan of kind of mixed tenure developments, particularly on bigger projects. I think the point that James was making really is, obviously by being able to get occupancy higher in an area, it creates more of a sense of community in those early days, which helps the sort of the sales story and the vision for people who are buying outright. And it probably also helps some of that chicken and egg situation you often get on the commercial premises that might be on some of those developments, whether it be a retail space or a restaurant or bar. It might encourage them to open their doors earlier, and again that helps buyers just sort of buy into that vision a bit sooner.
Yeah, and I think the other benefit that it adds, I think, is that a lot of the time we're trying to communicate what it's like to actually live at a development, whether you're renting or buying it, and there's even more sort of importance placed on retaining tenants. So the amenities have to be right. You have to, there's more around the lifestyle, and if actually there's a kind of mutual benefit there from a BTS point of view as well, then I think that's great. And then I guess when you convert that into a sort of customer acquisition or marketing strategy, it just adds more strings to your bow, doesn't it? Because it gives you more.
Absolutely.
I think Darren's point earlier about the parking aspect. If you have more parking, you have more potential customers. It's the same kind of thing. It's that ultimately that's people's intention in this country eventually to own and to buy. That's absolutely clear. All the data supports that. So why shouldn't build to rent be a kind of component for bringing those customers in ultimately to eventually be a customer, either from a sort of a shared ownership perspective or a private sale perspective?
I know some people in the build to rent sector would probably disagree with you on that, Chris, in terms of their and the culture of home ownership in the UK is quite different to the States and Europe, but it's fascinating to see how this is evolving, and particularly in single family housing, where actually we now have data that looks at the similar house builder product on the opposite side of the cul-de-sac, one managed as a build to rent product, one as a build to sell, and how the experience differs, and actually providing in houses the offer of sort of an institutional landlord, which most of our data in housing is actually from owners and shared owners rather than tenants. So it'd be really interesting to see how that data develops moving forward. We've got 4 minutes left, so just one other question. I think this is probably more for me, from Jack. Do you ask homeowners about their experience on the new home demonstration? and key handover. We don't, Jack, specifically, we do ask you to rate customer service, delivery quality, after sales care, build timetable, and would you recommend this developer? And they often add comments to that. So we do have a narrative around that, but we've focused much more on the actual sort of purchasing, snagging experience, and then ultimately the lived experience, which is what HomeViews is all about. Well, we're slightly early, but I think we've covered a lot, and there's a very long report for all of you, a very informative and very long report for all of you to read. So I'm just going to quickly put the QR code here up on screen, where you can download the New Build Resident Experience report, see all of the top rated for developers and developments across the country, and all of those insights that we've combined with Zoopla. I really do hope it's informative and helpful. We're very proud of it, and we'll be doing a lot more of this moving forward. Thank you very much to our panel today, Alex, Chris and Darren. It's been a really great discussion, and look forward to seeing everyone very soon. Thank you very much.